loved music then, and before I lost my sight.
A blind man who brought revolution to the music industry. Ray Charles wasn't just a singer or a pianist, he was the architect of soul, the man who fused gospel, blues, and jazz into a new sound that broke barriers and defied categories. Blind since childhood, yet able to see further than most with his gift, Charles turned every note into a testimony of pain, joy, and resilience. Throughout his decades-long career, he crossed paths with countless legends, but only a few ever earned a place in his heart.
I guess I'm going to lose at least about a third of my fans right now.
Before his death in 2004, Charles opened up about the 6 musicians who inspired him the most, helped him the most, the voices and talents that were his favorites above all others. His list was not just about music. It was a reflection of the battles he fought, the dreams he carried, and the giants he believed truly moved the world of sound. Let's start with number 1, Nat King Cole.
I have been asked by a lot of people, why do I...
Back in the 1930s, when Ray Charles was just a boy growing up in Greenville, Florida, the world of music seemed far away from his dirt road life. He had already begun to lose his sight, and by the time he was 7, he was completely blind. But the radio became his window to the world, and one voice in particular pierced through his darkness, the smooth, velvet tones of Nat King Cole. For young Ray, Cole was more than a singer. He was proof that a black man could break barriers, command respect, and create beauty that the whole world had to acknowledge. Ray often recalled how, as a child, he would press his ear close to the radio, memorizing every note and phrase from Cole's records. Songs like Sweet Lorraine and Straighten Up and Fly Right were more than melodies to him, they were lessons. Cole wasn't just singing, he was shaping an entire generation of black musicians by showing them that sophistication, polish, and artistry could open doors in a segregated America. Fast forward to the 1940s, as Ray was beginning to play in clubs and scrape a living as a young pianist, Nat King Cole had already become a household name. He was the first black man to host his own television show, The Nat King Cole Show, in 1956, a move so daring that it made an impression on every young black musician at the time. Ray admired not only Cole's music, but also his courage. Cole faced constant racism, even while living in Los Angeles, where his own neighbors petitioned to keep him from moving into their neighborhood. Yet, Cole never let it stop him. For Ray, this resilience was deeply personal. It was the model of dignity he wanted to emulate in his own career. Musically, Ray's early style bore traces of Nat's influence. He once admitted that in his earlier years, he tried to sound exactly like Nat King Cole, and most people acknowledged that he did.
Like Nat Cole, I can't tell the difference. And I heard that so much. You sound just like Nat Cole.
From the phrasing of words to the mellow charm in his voice, Ray would imitate Cole until he could almost convince listeners it was Nat himself on stage. Audiences in small Florida clubs would sometimes shout, "Play like Nat," and Ray would deliver, smiling to himself, knowing he was borrowing from the master. What interested Ray the most about Cole was his balance between artistry and accessibility. Nat King Cole was a jazz man at heart, but he knew how to bring jazz to the people, dressing it in lush arrangements and a voice so smooth it could glide into living rooms across America. Ray admired that ability to stay authentic while still reaching the masses. It was a lesson he carried into his own career, blending gospel, blues, and jazz into the birth of soul music. By the time Ray Charles became a star in the 1950s and 60s, he often paid homage to Cole. He covered songs associated with him, and he spoke openly about how Nat had been the spark that ignited his journey. Even after finding his own unique sound, Ray never forgot the foundation. He once remarked that without Nat King Cole, he might never have believed it was possible for someone like him to succeed at all. Ray described Cole as a lifeline, a blueprint, and a quiet giant who opened the doors that Ray himself and many others walked through. He was the man who first taught him that greatness was possible. Number 2, Elvis Presley.
I really can't criticize anybody, in the entertainment field.
While speaking during an interview, Ray said, "Presley came along at the right time." For many, it was a surprising admission. Presley was a figure who divided opinions in the black community. To some, he was the ultimate thief, a white man who built his fortune on the backs of black musicians, whose songs and style he borrowed without proper credit. Yet, for Ray, the story of Presley was more complicated. Despite the criticisms and accusations swirling around Presley, Ray admired his music, his style, and the energy he brought to the stage.
I don't think of Elvis like that because I know too many
Ray spoke with excitement about how Presley's songs got him dancing and stirred something joyful inside him, the kind of raw rhythm and drive that made his body move before his mind even caught up. Ray understood something most critics refused to acknowledge. Presley, for all his flaws, was a vessel for a sound that was already in the soil of America. Gospel, blues, and rhythm and blues, the very DNA of Presley's music, were sounds Ray grew up with, sounds rooted in the Black experience. While others saw Presley as a cultural appropriator, Ray saw him as someone who carried those sounds into places where Black musicians were barred from entering. Interestingly, during the 1950s, when Presley exploded onto the scene with songs like Heartbreak Hotel and Hound Dog, Black musicians across the South watched with mixed emotions. Ray himself was still carving out his own career, blending gospel fervor with blues grit into what would become soul music. He heard the criticisms of Presley loud and clear, but when he listened closely, what struck him was not theft, but vibe. Elvis had a feel, a rawness, and a delivery that made Ray nod his head, even when others turned away, in disdain. What Ray appreciated most was Presley's authenticity in performance. Presley wasn't technically the best singer, nor the most skilled musician, but he had a presence, that ability to take a stage and command it. Ray respected that. To him, performance was as much about spirit as it was about technical perfection, and Presley, love him or hate him, had spirit in abundance. Ray also admired Presley's ability to connect with people. He was impressed by how people across racial lines flocked to his music, and how Presley's sound managed to unite audiences in ways politics never could. For Ray, who believed in music as a universal language, this was significant. It was proof that the rhythms of Black culture could not be contained, that even when filtered through a white performer, they still carried the power to shake the world. Over and over again, Ray defended Presley against accusations of racism. He pointed out that Presley had grown up in the South, surrounded by Black culture, attending Black churches, listening to the blues, and absorbing it all. All these were enough for him to love Presley. Number 3, Della Reese.
At that time, I was a lyric soprano, and so was this lady.
Ray constantly referred to Reese as the Queen. For a man who had shared rooms and stages with some of the greatest musicians who ever lived, Ray wasn't easily impressed. Yet when he finally came face to face with Della, he admitted he was caught off guard. In his own words, he was starstruck. That's ironic, coming from a blind man, but according to him, he was really happy to meet her. By the late 1960s, Della Reese wasn't just a singer, she was a presence. Her voice could glide across a room, her laughter could fill it, and her wisdom could silence it. Ray had admired her from a distance for years, ever since her early recordings in the 1950s began making waves, but meeting her in person was something else entirely, he narrated. Ray shared in an interview, "She has a way of making you feel like you could do more even as a musician. She is the kind of woman who sets standards for other women. Starting a show was smart." That admiration turned into collaboration in October 1969, when Ray appeared on Della, her nationally syndicated talk and variety show. This was no ordinary invitation. Reese had just broken barriers by becoming the first Black woman in America to host her own talk show on such a scale, and Ray understood the weight of that achievement. To him, this wasn't just another TV appearance, it was history in motion.
She went against everything that...
When the curtain lifted and Reese introduced him, Ray smiled wider than usual. Those who were in the studio that night said his performance felt charged, almost as if he were trying to honor her by giving more than he usually gave. Reese watched with pride as Ray moved through his set, her admiration for him mirrored in the way she listened. It wasn't just guest and host, it was two artists meeting face to face with respect, flowing both ways. But for Ray, what truly left an impression wasn't the music they shared on that stage. It was the way Reese carried herself off stage. She was sharp, grounded, and unafraid to say what needed to be said. In an industry filled with egos and exploitation, Della was different. She knew the business and didn't let it swallow her whole. That, to Ray, was strength. He explained that his first real conversation with Della changed the way he thought about women in the industry. "Some people come in, sing their songs, and fade away," he said once. But Della, she was bigger than that. She knew how to survive, and she knew how to win. Their bond became one of mutual admiration. Reese often credited Ray for shaping the direction of modern music, while Ray, in turn, praised her for being not only talented, but wise. It was rare for him to speak so highly of a contemporary without also noting their flaws. But with Reese, his tone was different. It was respect without reservation. To him, She was proof that brilliance wasn't only found in talent, it was found in dignity, intelligence, resilience, and the ability to carve your own path when the world was against you. For Ray Charles, Della Reese wasn't just another singer. She was the queen, the woman who could silence even the genius himself, leaving him humbled, impressed, and forever changed. Number 4, Johann Sebastian Bach. Unlike other musicians loved by Ray, Bach struck him on a much deeper level. To Ray, Bach was not simply another composer from the past. He was, in Ray's words, the greatest musician that ever lived. Ray's love for Bach began when he was still a boy. By then, he had already lost his sight, but the school introduced him to classical music, and Bach's compositions became a revelation. What stunned Ray was not just the beauty of the melodies, but the complexity hidden inside them. He explained in an interview that Bach's music trained him to think differently at the piano, forcing his hands to act independently, creating textures and layers he had never imagined before.
From a technical point of view, I think he was greatest in the world for making your hands do.
Bach's inventions and fugues in particular became a foundation for Ray's musical mind. While other children might have dreaded practicing the structured lines of classical music, Ray found freedom in it. To him, Bach wasn't rigid, he was liberating. Bach taught him that each hand could carry its own rhythm, its own melody, yet together create something greater than the sum of its parts. That lesson became essential in shaping the Ray sound, the left hand pulsing with blues or gospel drive, the right hand dancing with jazz riffs and improvisation. What fascinated Ray most was how timeless Bach was. Born in 1685, centuries before jazz, soul, or rhythm and blues even existed, Bach was still teaching lessons to a blind black boy in the segregated South of the 1930s and 40s. That universality was timeless. He often said that music, when it was real, never aged, and Bach was proof. When Ray broke into the music industry in the 1950s, he carried Bach with him, even when playing rhythm and blues clubs or recording gospel-influenced hits. Beneath the swing of What Did I Say or the tenderness of Georgia on My Mind, the discipline and independence of Bach's counterpoint was always there. His band members noticed that Ray demanded a level of precision unusual in popular music at the time, and that demand came from his early immersion in Bach. Ray never stopped celebrating Bach publicly. In interviews, he often returned to his name, even when asked about his heroes in jazz, gospel, or blues. Bach, in Ray's mind, was a genius who transcended era, genre, and culture. Even late in his career, when Ray had conquered almost every genre imaginable, he credited Bach for shaping the way he thought. No love greater than that. Number 5, Aretha Franklin.
They're enjoying it, and you can see it in their expression.
Ray's love for Aretha was loud, and he didn't hold back when talking about her to those who cared to listen. He admired her voice, especially her slow songs, the ones that seemed to open wounds and then heal them in the same breath.
Slow songs that Aretha made some years ago, I like that.
Their bond, however, was more than just about music. By the early 1970s, Ray was fighting battles that the public rarely saw. Addiction, financial strain, and emotional exhaustion were eating away at him. He later confessed that this was one of the lowest points of his life, days when he wondered if he could keep going. That was when Aretha Franklin stepped in. Word had reached her through mutual friends that Ray wasn't doing well. Without hesitation, she called him directly. She intentionally made it a duty to call him often, listen to him as he spoke about his fears, his mistakes, and the weight he carried. She even assisted him financially. Ray later said that it wasn't her advice that saved him, but her presence. Aretha made me feel like I wasn't alone, he told a friend years later. For Ray, who had been surrounded for years by handlers, agents, and executives, having a colleague who really cared hit different. From then on, Ray's admiration for Aretha went beyond music. He still loved her slow songs. Ain't No Way, Do Right Woman, Do Right Man, and I Never Loved a Man were among his favorites, but it was her humanity that touched him most deeply. She wasn't just the musician of soul. To Ray, she was the colleague turned sister who reached out when the crown of genius felt unbearably heavy on his own head. In later interviews, when asked Aretha, he talked highly about her without hesitation. He spoke of her strength, her kindness, and her wisdom. Aretha didn't just sing truth, he once remarked, she lived it. And one time, when I needed truth the most, she gave it to me. Their relationship remained one of mutual respect until the end. Aretha often called Ray the master, and Ray never missed a chance to remind the world that Aretha Franklin was in a league of her own. But privately, he cherished her for something far more intimate. She had seen him at his weakest and chosen to lift him up. For Ray Charles, Aretha greatness wasn't only in her slow songs, though they stirred his soul like nothing else. It was also in her compassion, showing up as a friend who refused to let him fall. Number 6, Willie Nelson.
Country, I like classical music. I like all kind of music, so.
When Ray and Nelson came together, it was more than just two legends recording a song. It was proof of what true teamwork in music could look like. Both men came from entirely different musical worlds. Ray from gospel, blues, and jazz. Willie from country and outlaw traditions. Yet when their voices blended, the boundaries dissolved. Their friendship went back decades, but it found its defining moment in 2004 with the release of Ray's final studio album, Genius Loves Company. The album was built on collaborations, pure connection, and when Willie stepped in, it became one of the standout partnerships. Together, they recorded It Was a Very Good Year, a reflective ballad originally made famous by Frank Sinatra. The song, already drenched in nostalgia, took on new meaning when Ray and Willie sang it side by side.
So, as we live our lives, we're going to find.
Their teamwork was evident in every line, despite doing opposite genres. Ray's soulful phrasing bending time, Willie's rugged tone anchoring the words in lived experience. Neither tried to outshine the other. Instead, they created space, letting the song breathe, letting their differences complement each other. The result was magic. The album, released in August 2004, just months after Ray's passing, went on to win 8 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year and Record of the Year. Willie often spoke about how much he valued working with Ray. He admired how Ray could step into any genre, country, blues, pop, gospel, and make it his own without ever losing authenticity. Ray, before his death, constantly spoke with deep respect about Willie. He loved Willie's approach to teamwork. In Willie, Ray found not only a peer, but a partner who understood that music wasn't about perfection. It was about telling the truth. During interviews about Genius Loves Company, Ray emphasized that the joy of the project came from working with friends like Willie. He often said that collaboration reminded him of his early days, when music was a shared language, not a competition. In Willie, he found someone who embodied that spirit completely. Their duet remains one of the most cherished tracks from the album, not because of vocal fireworks, but because of its intimacy. Two men, at the twilight of long careers, looking back on life with gratitude and honesty. It wasn't just a song, it was a conversation, a handshake, a shared laugh between friends who had carried the weight of music for generations. Genius Loves Company was a final masterpiece, thanks to the teamwork that creates not just songs, but timeless legacies. Let's know your thoughts in the comments section. Subscribe to this channel for more videos like this, like and share.